When you hear Kiki's Delivery Service, you probably think about the movie first. Actually, if you're anything like half of my online friends, then you probably don't even know that there's a book at all, which is, honest to God, a crime. Kiki's Delivery Service was written by Eiko Kodono back in the 80s when she was living in Japan again. Infamously, the whole book series, by the way, Kiki's Delivery Service is a full-on book series, but only the first book was translated into English as far as I know. But this whole book series is based off of a drawing her daughter made where she drew a witch flying through the air with a small radio. The drawing inspired her to not only write the book, it also inspired the philosophy she held when writing it, that while Kiki was a witch and she could fly, that she didn't have any other form of magic and instead needed to use her head to figure out her problems. In all other aspects than her flight, Kiki is just a normal girl. It's a philosophy that I think Eiko Kodono has faithfully followed. It's a charming story on the surface. A young witch moves out to the big city, faces some obstacles, comes out on top, and lives happily ever after. In the movie, there's this big moment that finally proves to everyone how good or great Kiki is, when she saves Tombo from the Zeppelin. But, funnily enough, this is something fully made up by the movie, and I think that after reading the book and watching the movie, that the book does have a better ending. It's a bit more cohesive in my opinion, but aside from that, the book ending is so much more emotionally fulfilling in a way that I really hope people close the book having taken something away from it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I haven't told you about all of the spoilers, themes, or symbolism, and I want to start with that. The main story of the book is that Kiki is a young witch who comes of age. When the daughter of a witch turns 10, they get to choose whether they want to be a witch or not. If she does, then she starts learning all her mother's magic, and when a witch turns 13, she leaves her parents' house to find a place of her own and is not allowed to return for a full year. Only after the year is over can she visit her parents again. Kiki decides to settle down in the town of Kuriko. She meets a baker named Osono who helps her get settled into the town and eventually helps her get her delivery business off the ground. From that point on, Kiki, together with her cat Gigi, deliver and solve problems all around town. From the small things like delivering birthday presents and poems, to something as big as spring and the new year. When the year's over, Kiki goes back home and stays for a few days before returning to Koriko, at which point the book ends. That's the journey that Kiki goes on. She decides that she wants to be a witch and finally finds herself a full moon to depart on when she's 13. For a book that seems so simple on the surface, it is certainly capable of giving you an emotional gut punch. Part of that is because the themes in the book itself tend to be very relatable even now. I think Kiki being so young ties into the first theme the book shows. She comes to an age where tradition becomes very important to witches, and this becomes her first hurdle in the book. In my notes, I wrote this down as Kiki versus the world, but a better term for it would be modernity versus tradition. I think it's important to give you the context when I say that. Modernity versus tradition. It feels vague, but Kodono really puts down what it is in the book. In Kiki's world, magic is a dying thing. There aren't many witches anymore, and the magic that they do have is waning, for a lack of a better term. This shows in a way that with each new generation of witches, they know less and less magic. Kiki's mother can fly and she can make sneeze medicine, but Kiki never really picks up her mother's medicinal hand and can only really fly. It's also shown that while flying on a broom is more of a general magic for witches, in the sense that they can all do it, losing their touch of magic means that unless you have a talent for it, like Kiki does, flying is hard. There's this older witch that Kiki meets when she first sets out on her journey. She's about a year older than her and is close to finishing her coming of age year. Her talent is something more like divining things, so her flying, for a lack of a better term, let's just say it's rough. She's zipping around, barely going in a straight line. Her broom acts more like a rowdy horse that's capable of more than just going forwards and backwards, and from how it's described in the book, I find it quite a miracle that her cat can stay seated on the broom at all. So, magic is this waning thing, and it's not really discussed in detail, but it's slightly implied that the world modernizing could be part of the reason for it. So, that sets up this subtle parallel. Witches are of the past, depend on tradition and an older way of living, while the world that Kiki goes into is modern. And Kiki, for her part, also wants to be modern. When her mother, whose name is Kokiri by the way, is glad that she's becoming a witch, she says that it's in their blood, because Kiki comes from a long line of witches, but Kiki in juxtaposition directly opposes this. I don't think she ever verbally says it in the book, but it's clear in her thinking that Kiki doesn't want to become a witch just because it's tradition. It's because she's decided it. Her internal response is literally, no, it's more than that. I decided for myself. And later on goes as far as to state, and again, these are her internal thoughts, but she states that she wants to be a modern witch. Modernity versus tradition is a constant debate in the first half of the book. For a book from the 80s, I find that this subject is still very much present in today's society. Reading this from someone who comes from Japan also gives it a feel like it comes more of a place of experience rather than something that's just added for interest. It feels that way too when you can directly read not just Kiki's internal debate, but also what actually happens around her. The things that Kiki does to be a modern witch in her own sense and how people react to them can be harsh at times. For example, her coming of age flight, she wants to go out in a new and colorful dress that she saw in a storefront. She's even made her own broom just for this day because she wants everything to be new for when she becomes her own idea for a new witch. Her mother very quickly crashes that party though. She convinces Kiki to go with a traditional dress in witch's black, and also convinces to swap brooms with her so she'll have something more reliable for when she goes out into the world. It's not a bad idea, but it doesn't make Kiki happy that the journey where she is becoming of age, that she can't even do something as simple as decide what she is going to wear. Kiki doesn't seem like one who is much for tradition, which makes it very interesting, at least to me, that there are times where she decides to be modern, but also times where she decides to be a bit traditionalist. Because the book does start with a tradition, one Kiki is happy to follow, which is deciding at 10 and then going away from home at 13. Even then, she does change it up a little. She convinces her dad to get her a little red radio so she can listen to music as she goes, and later in the book, she does get the chance to change her clothing when she helps a seamstress. I want to add that Kiki's idea of being a new or modern witch is made more interesting when she does go against it. Like, for example, when she meets Tombo, she tells him that she can fly because of her witch's blood, not because of her broom. And this quote sounds like something that we'd hear from Kokiri rather than from Kiki herself. But nonetheless, she is the one to say it. In all the ways that she wants to be a modern witch, she still echoes something of the past through her traditions. And again, for a book that's from the 80s, it still feels like something people today can heavily relate to. In a world changing so much, what do we take with us from our cultures, our traditions, and what do we leave behind for the sake of convenience? Are we at our core just the people we were from yesterday, or do we get to shape ourselves beyond what the people before us think of us as? Kiki is a very relatable character, and I know that protagonists of children's books tend to be, but she's relatable in such a charming way. She's first introduced to us as though she's something so mystical, and then by the second chapter, this mystical being that rings the bells on the tops of trees by flying with her broom is arguing with her mom about procrastinating on something that she has had 3 years to prepare for. It's almost like a teenager arguing with their mom about cleaning their room, and throughout the story itself, you can really relate to Kiki in certain moments. When the people of Kuriko first meet her and the reaction isn't as welcoming or as open as she'd hoped, she feels uncertain, put off her feet, so to say. She is used to people having a more positive view of witches in her town, and living in a small town versus living in something akin to a city carries a very different mentality that, at that point in the book, hits her in the face. And later in the story, when she's feeling down or feels like life is too monotonous and she's unsure what to do about it because at that point, she lives on her own and has a relatively successful business. It should be everything she's ever wanted, but now that she has it, it feels unfulfilling. Kadono making a 13-year-old go through essentially what is a midlife crisis is a bit funny, but in a moment when you read it, you can't help but feel for her plight. Which makes it so great when the story asks, how do you move through something like this? And then also answers it. Kiki meets new people, gets new perspectives, and grows. She meets this painter who she helps and who helps her in turn, introducing her to a bit of the witch's way, and in turn, she becomes inspired by Kiki. She makes a painting, and that's something that begins to change the minds of the people in the town. Kiki becomes less this scary image of a witch and more like Kiki herself. When Kiki's unsure on what to do and she feels so monotonous, she meets Violet, a handywoman on one of her deliveries. Someone who does such boring work but manages to make her life so much fun through the little things. She bakes her sister cookies, she sings while she works, she makes things out of objects you don't expect it to be from, and she gets crafty with her solutions. Kiki just meets people. She learns and she grows, and she does so in an almost invisible way up until you reach the ending. And eventually, when that year is over, and Kiki gets to come home, she becomes scared. Imagine that you've gone off to college. It's your first year, and this is the first time you've lived somewhere else than your childhood home. Everything is new, different, and uncertain, but you've gone and changed and managed to find your place in it. You've grown too. You've changed too. And now you get the chance to go back home, to your old home. Do you still fit in your old place? Have you changed too much, or haven't you changed enough in that year that you've been gone? Kiki's return home is when we see her at her most human and most vulnerable. She worries that she hasn't done enough, that she could have done more with her time. It's a worry that she carries with her all the way home, only to realize that she really didn't need to worry at all. Before she's even left Koriko, she's stopped by Hosono, who gives her some bread to bring back to her parents as a gift. She receives another gift from Tombo before she leaves, and he tells her that he'll be waving her goodbye from the large bridge in town. Kiki leaves for her old home with the love from the people of her current one. People she's helped, people who have helped her. It's all the consequences of her actions. Good karma that catches up. And when she finally arrives in her town of birth and knocks on her old front door, she's welcomed with open arms by parents who couldn't be prouder of her. After finishing the book, I realized that another big theme here lies in identity. Who Kiki is and how she can find herself when experiencing such a great change in her life. I think it reflects people at different times in their lives. Kids moving away from college, people buying a bike in a midlife crisis, elders wondering if they've done enough with their time. Everything she faces is something that you can think a real-life analogy for. Who we are, what we identify with. There's this line in the beginning of the book. It's something that the older witch said to Kiki as a piece of advice when she starts her journey. Something she says in earnest when Kiki asks her why she flies if she's not good at it. She says, if you don't fly every now and then, you start to forget that you're a witch, and even who you are at all. At the time, it sounded more like practical advice, that if Kiki doesn't practice flying, that she would forget how to, but when the story ends, it rings a more powerful message. Of course, there are times when it's good to be in the moment, to just walk around and take things in. That's how she met Osono, after all. But when she's on the ground, Kiki is also faced with all her worries. But when she's flying, she realizes what she has. It's easier to see what she's accomplished. Sometimes you forget who you are at all, and all you need then is to be reminded. See the bigger picture. See your worries and problems in scale, and breathe.